I'm Paul Levinson, and welcome to Light On Light Through episode 289. My old friend Phil Merkel, aka Captain Phil, interviewed me a few hours ago on WUSB radio. We talked about, Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter and the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And actually, those two important topics do have at least one connecting point, which we talk about as well. So here you are with this interview.
Paul, do you have a message for Destiny's The Voice of Science Fiction, which you were actually a guest on?
Yeah, have me as a guest again. No, it's a great show. And listen, congratulations, Howard. Actually, though, just to show you how ignorant I am, although many people already know that, I thought it was Howard who was doing the voice in reading those Dear Cthulhu letters. But you mentioned Patrick Thomas.
Well, Patrick's the writer, and Howard, I think, does the narration, and Patrick does the voice of Cthulhu.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. But an advice column by Cthulhu, actually, Paul, do you think if Cthulhu showed up, would he run for president on the Republican ticket, and would he win?
I don't know, but he would be an improvement over what the Republicans are putting up, that's for sure.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yes, Howard definitely should have you back. I'm going to be passing this along to him, and he will be in touch because Howard's better than I am at following through on things. So.
You're okay.
I'm okay. I threw a couple of ideas at you last night when I talked to you about coming on again. And let's kick it off with your choice, though. Elon Musk and his possible purchase of Twitter. Last time we talked, I seem to remember we were talking about free speech in Twitter, and you thought that Trump and others should not have been banned, that it was not good for free speech. What do you have to say about this situation, Paul?
No, you're confusing me with someone else. Seriously, I'm never happy about anyone being censored, but I thought that in the case of Trump, because he was clearly guilty of inciting a riot, that's not a question of free speech. That's a question of conspiracy to commit a crime, which an insurrection is. And so, although I'm never happy to see any kind of censorship, I think that Twitter did the right thing banning him from the system. And that actually gets me into the problem that I have with Elon Musk. And just to be clear, obviously Elon Musk has done a lot of things, and at least two of the things that he's done, I'm a big fan of. I'm certainly very happy about SpaceX. I think, you and I have talked about this, that it's extremely unfortunate, to say the least, that we human beings walked on the moon in 1969, and after all these years, we still haven't gotten to Mars. We've, in terms of getting human beings out into space, pretty much it's been, just the space station, and we were doing the equivalent of that back in the 1970s. So Musk deserves an enormous amount of credit for what he's done with the SpaceX program. The other thing that I really admire and respect Musk about is what he's done with Tesla. And obviously, the environment is a serious problem. It's going from bad to worse in terms of the rise of temperatures around the world. And Tesla is not single-handedly, but they're really beginning to make a dent in these gases that are emitted by traditional gasoline-guzzling cars. And, I probably mentioned this, I drive a Prius, so I'm at least halfway there. I have a hybrid. I would have bought a Tesla if I could have afforded it. And one of these years, I'm sure I'll be able to afford some kind of electric vehicle. So good for Musk for doing that with automobiles. But I'm not happy with what he's saying he wants to do with Twitter he gives lip service for, saying, well, he's not talking about illegal speech. But anyone who can at all think about bringing Trump back to Twitter, and it's not even clear what Musk's position is about that. He's been saying that, if you want to know what his views are about bringing Trump back to Twitter, he gives ridiculous examples like, "Oh, I'm going to buy Coca-Cola and put the cocaine back into Coca-Cola." So, it was funny, and that seems to be saying that Trump is cocaine, and therefore he's not going to bring Trump back to Twitter. But the very fact that he could even be thinking about it, that bothers me. And actually, I just finished writing an article for a Polish journal that I'm actually guest editing, and they asked me to write an article about the future of social media. And when I started writing the article, Elon Musk was not in the article. But since I just finished writing it, I finished with Elon Musk. And one of the things that I found in my research, I sort of vaguely knew this, are the dangerous statements that Musk has made about COVID-19. For example, he said at one point that children are essentially immune from the virus. Totally not true.
Especially lately. I mean, I believe it was Fauci who said that the numbers of children infected was greatly underreported.
Yeah, that's right. And look, I know children who've gotten it. It's just, they're not immune to it. Maybe they're a little less likely to be adversely affected than adults, but they're not immune to it. And believe it or not, Musk also bought into Trump's nonsense about the pandemic being over by Easter. That is Easter 2020. This is one of Trump's gems. He said this like in early March. It'll be over in a month or two. In addition to that, Musk endorsed, I can't remember the name of it, chloro something, one of these bogus cures for...
Was it hydrochloroquine? Is that...
Yeah, hydrochloroquine,
yeah.
Right, that's right. And, so if this is Musk's idea of free speech, I'm sorry, again, free speech does not protect speech that if people follow what the speech is saying, they'll die. So, if somebody thinks they're going to be safe by taking a bogus cure, that, Twitter is right to exclude that from its site. And if a parent reads on Twitter, hey, your kids are essentially immune, God forbid what could happen to those kids.
Yeah.
So I'm concerned about Musk taking over Twitter. I'm not leaving Twitter. I don't think he's the devil. Musk is the devil incarnate. But look, this says something, and I think people around the world sometimes have a hard time realizing this. The United States is not just a capitalist country in theory. It's a capitalist country in practice. And there's nothing particularly wrong with capitalism. I mean, it does a lot of good things. It may not be the best system in the world. But one thing that I don't like about capitalism is you can have an online system as crucial to the United States and the world as Twitter has become. And basically, someone who can throw the most money at the stockholders, in this case, whatever it is, $45, $50 billion, that person can buy and therefore totally control the system. I don't like that. Again, I don't want to bring the government in to make regulations as to who can buy and not buy something, because that kind of power all too easily can become dictatorial and totalitarian. But at the same time, I don't think it's a healthy thing for billionaires to be able to throw money around like that and buy a system like Twitter and then do with it as they please.
I find it interesting, once this idea of Musk buying Twitter came out, that was the first thing people went to was removal of the Trump ban. And as you were talking, Paul, I'm thinking to myself, what does Elon Musk need for Trump Elon Musk could buy Trump with his lunch money. Is there any benefit to Musk to be helping Trump? I mean, is there anything Trump can do for him? I would think it would be totally the other way around. It seems he is so powerful and so immune from everything, immune from any controls, that he wouldn't need to kowtow to Trump. So,
I agree with you. Look, I think I'll say this on Musk's behalf. You've heard me say that I'm an absolutist regarding the First Amendment, but that's only an absolutist when what is being debated, whether or not this speech or print or whatever the communication is, should be allowed to go out there. If that communication carries with it the possibility of death for people who hear it, or read it, and this gets back again to this bogus information, this lethally misleading information about COVID. So I'm not that much of an absolutist. I put life and death, ahead of freedom of speech. But I'll say this for Musk: he's consistent. I don't agree with where his consistency lands him, but I don't know if you noticed this. Musk also owns and built a system called Starlink. It's part of his SpaceX work, right? And it's basically a telecom system. And when Russia invaded Ukraine, Musk did a very good thing. He said to Ukraine, "Hey, we're going to give you. We'll send in whatever you need to set this up so you can use this system." And I was very happy to hear that, because I think and we can talk about this as well, obviously, not for an hour, for like days and days. I think the Russian invasion of Ukraine is like the worst thing that's happened in the world since Hitler. So
agreed, absolutely agreed. And the reports coming in, and the fact that some people don't think it's real, they think they're crisis actors.
Exactly.
It's very upsetting. And we watch the news. My wife and I, we sit there and watch the news, and my wife literally can't hear the stories. It upsets her so much. The stories of the mass graves, the rapes, the bombing of civilians. It's so difficult to listen to. And yet I've come across people who say, and some of this stuff is coming out of the Russian news media, and it seems very foxy, if you know what I mean, Paul.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, listen, Lavrov, their foreign minister, basically praised Fox. I don't know if you saw this. I actually filed a formal complaint, but the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, they never respond to that. So I don't know what they're going to do, probably nothing. But I seriously filed a complaint with the Federal Trade Commission that Fox should be called up on charges of false advertising, because what Fox News has been doing is not broadcasting the news about Russia. You have people like Tucker Carlson, who's basically just spouting Russian propaganda, more lies, and that's false advertising. The people who tune into Fox, they're not getting the news; they're getting Russian propaganda. Fox should really change its name, to be honest, and call themselves Fox Russian Propaganda.
Yeah.
Then I just want to say, though, about Russia, just to complete what I was saying about Elon Musk. So he does this good thing for Ukraine, gives them Starlink. But then someone asked him, well, wait a second, Russia already has access to Starlink. Are you going to block them, the Russians, from Starlink? And Musk answers, very sarcastically, well, pardon me for being an absolutist on free expression, but no, I'm not going to block the Russians or anyone, from using my system. I genuinely believe in free expression. And again, my thought is, so you would allow Adolf Hitler to use Starlink? I mean, and what are the Russians using Starlink for? To basically lie to the world and their own people that that Zelensky is a Nazi, and the Russians are just going in there to liberate the Ukrainian people.
They're liberating them from breathing. That's what they're liberating them from.
Exactly.
Oh my goodness.
Exactly right.
Oh
yeah. So I mean, listen, getting back to what you're saying about your wife, I think any human being feels the same way. It is heartbreaking to watch and see what's going on there. Obviously, you and I remember September 11th here in the United States, here in New York, and that was unbelievably horrible. But when you compare that to what's going on in Ukraine, September 11th, a total of 2 buildings were destroyed. About 3,000 people lost their lives. I mean, a lot of people were hurt. I'm in no way minimizing that terrible terrorist attack. But that basically took place. It was over in a couple of hours, and then we were able to rebuild and, get back on our feet after that incredible trauma, that emotional shock, and that physical destruction. These brave people in Ukraine, this has now been going on, since February, and they just bomb buildings. And this as well as I. They've killed, children, pregnant women, and I don't know. I don't care whether it's deliberate or not. They shouldn't be hurling bombs and having soldiers open fire in a city. They shouldn't be firing on Ukrainian soldiers either. But at least that's part of what a war is. But clearly, the Russians don't care. So this is, I never thought that in my now long lifetime, and I'm sure you feel the same, Phil, we would ever be in a position like this, seeing this unfold before our very eyes. And
are we closer to a face-to-face ground war with Russia than we were in Korea or Vietnam? How do those compare? Yeah. Because we always had proxies fighting in those wars. I mean, we were on the ground, in those places, but we if we go in, we will be face-to-face with the Russian military.
I know. Look, that's almost unthinkable, and that raises another question that people like you and I, who are, tormented by what's going on and want to do something, but when you sit down and think about it, and when you talk it over with other people, what are we willing to do? What are we willing to risk? The truth of the matter is, I don't know Putin from Adam. I like to think that he has at least a modicum of rationality and knows that if, for example, he does anything with a nuclear weapon, it's going to start an all-out nuclear war. But that is the very fact that we can even consider that. One of the problems, I think, and again, looking back now over the decades, most people in the world, I know that it happened to me. I got the wrong impression in the 1990s. I thought we had closed the book on the possibility of a nuclear war. And I think we took our eyes off the ball. Again, September 11th had something to do with it because we began to focus on that kind of terrorism, which indeed we should have. But right around the same time as September 11th is when Putin rose to power in Russia. And, he is determined to reestablish the Soviet Union. And I hope he's not willing to get involved in a nuclear war to do that. But so far, we're walking through a field of landmines, and I think that. But at the same time, I would like to do more to help the Ukrainians. And from the very beginning, the Ukrainians said they need planes. I don't know why we didn't give them everything that we're giving to them now, and even more a month and a half ago. But okay, better late than never. Winston Churchill had a great comment about the United States, as he did about many things. He said, you can always depend on the United States to do the right thing after every other option is exhausted.
Oh my goodness. That's a great quote. Yeah, I in the back of my mind, I'm saying to myself, I think Biden was giving him a chance to back out. the longer it goes on, the deeper he gets into it. I mean, the latest thing I heard was, Putin considering using tactical nukes in Ukraine. You know, or who? I think I heard this on Democracy Now. I might have heard it on PBS NewsHour. He doesn't really need to use tactical nukes. All he needs to do, because Ukraine has tons of nuclear power plants. All he needs to do is blow up one of those power plants, and he has a dirty bomb. You know, we could poison the ground, and the whole thing that with Chernobyl, it just you know what? Let's stay on the nuclear subject for 1 second here. The thing I found interesting also as this is playing out, and I'm certain our military intelligence and CIA are loving this work because it's showing us how resilient or not resilient the Russian military is. You know, where they're taking tanks out with little drones, that sort of thing. Do you think the Russian nuclear arsenal is better maintained than the Russian military has been? Because it seems to me like in the era of the oligarchs have been siphoning off funds that should have been used or could have been used to maintain the Russian military. And instead have been buying yachts and islands and things like that. And it seems like this army was not prepared, and that was one of the reasons why Ukraine has done so well. You know, and I'm saying that's I thought Ukraine was going to fall in a week, and that the fact that they're still going, you know, is just amazing. I thought Zelensky was a dead man walking. You know.
Well, yeah, I by the way, I think Zelensky, apropos of Churchill, and other people have already been saying this, he is going to go down in history as one of the great champions of democracy.
An actor and a comedian. An actor and a comedian, Paul.
That's right. And the way he has with words, I mean, I began to believe that, you know what? You know, I think Ukraine has a chance. When the day that the war started, and Zelensky gets on television and says, they've offered me a plane out of here. I don't need a trip. I need ammunition.
Yes.
So I mean, you can see he got right down to the nitty gritty. But you know, as far as the poor performance of the Russian military, I was thinking about that, and I've read some history. The truth of the matter is, if you look at the 20th century, I mean, you can go further back than that. The Russian military has never been much good. In World War I, that's what led to the Communist Revolution. The Tsar's army in World War I just fell to pieces. You know, the Central Powers, whatever they were called then, Germany, Austria, and Turkey, they basically knocked Russia out of the war. That was World War I. In World War II, okay, they managed to hold on because the Nazis went too far, too fast. They went in, with their military force, and their lines were stretched so thin, and it is a very big distance, that eventually they couldn't supply their lines. The Russian winter set in, and in Leningrad, St. Petersburg, whatever it was called then, the Russians finally managed to stop the Germans. But, they didn't do all that well, and they wouldn't have won the Second World War ultimately had it not been for the United States. And they developed their nuclear weapons and so on, but they were beaten badly on the ground in Afghanistan. All that the current Russian army is good at is just going in and killing civilians. That's really what it amounts to. That's what they did in Chechnya. That's what they did in Syria. And look at, I'm obviously, to say the least, I'm glad that ISIS was largely destroyed, but it's not that they won some kind of military battle with ISIS in Syria. They just went in and dropped as many bombs as they could in areas where they thought ISIS was. And it's not that big a country. And so they succeeded in pretty much putting ISIS out of business back then. But, they're no military geniuses. And, Putin has this view that somehow he has this great military force. He doesn't. But I don't know what the story is with nuclear weapons. Yeah. And, I think we have to assume that we know for a fact that they do have nuclear weapons. They do have, intercontinental ballistic missiles. They now have, by the way, they were using some kind of new missile, which Putin said could evade, our, anti-missile systems. I don't know whether that's true or not. I don't believe anything they say. But what bothers me is, given the poor performance of the traditional Russian military, their ship, their flagship got sunk. I was
Amazing.
delighted to see that. But given that poor performance over and over again, I just hope Putin doesn't do, something that can basically kill the world.
Yeah.
And
Or
frankly,
light the fire. The spark that lights the fire that sets the world on fire.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
It's funny. I'm so glad you said that about the Russian military, because I think my sources of information on the ferocity and the professionalism, or the danger of the Russian military, has been informed by books like Firefox and Clive Cussler novels, and things like that, where it's always this, or the Hunt for Red October, where it's always this, the Russians have invented this thing and we're all gonna panic now, and and that sort of thing. And when they initially came in, I was kind of like shocked, because I had that fictional narrative going in my head, but but yeah, I mean, Afghanistan held them off for, what was it, a decade, 2 decades?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Well, Afghanistan basically the same to us too, but yeah, it's just amazing that they're hanging on this long. And when Zelensky came out and said, I don't need a plane ticket, I need bullets, I don't think we've seen that from a leader in years. I mean. And at first, I didn't believe it. You know what I'm saying, Paul? I thought this is part of the play that's going on here, and he's going to get out, and he never did. He's out there, and so that was kind of shocking. But I just hope somehow this can come to some sort of resolution. And every day it goes on, it seems like we're further and further away from it being able to be stopped. What do you see as a possible outcome as we move from spring into summer? And will this be done by the end of the year? Will Russia retreat? Are they in too deep now? What do you think?
I honestly don't know. I mean, because, for example, I've heard Ambassador Michael McFaul talk about this. He actually was ambassador to Russia during the Obama years. And he says, look, he probably knows Putin, 1,000 times better than you or I, or most people do. And he can't even predict, because it was an irrational thing for Putin to do what he did in the first place, that is, invade this country the way he did. And, one of the things that the Biden administration was talking about, and, Blinken and our Secretary of State and other world leaders were talking about, is let's give Putin an off-ramp. That is, an off-ramp so that he wouldn't invade Ukraine. What can we give him to avert that invasion? And it turned out there was nothing that he was willing to take. And now here we are, months into the war. The Russians have been badly beaten. Putin doesn't seem to be in any hurry to stop this. As brilliant as the Ukrainian military and the Ukrainians in general have been, they're not going to be able to attack Moscow and make Russia withdraw from the war for that reason. It's just too big a country, and the Ukraine doesn't have enough people to do that. And so everything hinges on Putin. And frankly, I'll tell you what I hope for. I hope he drops dead.
Yeah.
So, by the way, I interviewed a Ukrainian writer and scholar who's currently in Vienna. She and her sister and nephew or niece lived a little north of Kiev, and they went to Vienna, and she feels badly about that. And she basically said she and Ukrainians don't want Putin to drop dead. They want him tried for war crimes and spending the rest of his life in prison. So I would be satisfied with that as well. But in order for that to happen, and that's why dropping dead in some ways is the simplest thing, but that's obviously beyond our control. But in order for Putin to be arrested, uh, he either has to leave Russia. He's not going to do that. He's not stupid. So there has to be almost a revolution inside Russia. In other words, Russians have to stand up and depose him. That would be a way for the war to end. Put somebody in who sees how destructive this is, not just to Ukraine, which it obviously is, but to Russia as well. But I have no idea, whether that's going to happen. Putin has a very tight grip on the country. It may be Russia, not the Soviet Union, but he runs Russia as if it were the Soviet Union. He comes from the KGB.
Yeah.
So, I honestly don't know. I mean, McFaul, Ambassador McFaul has been saying, well, if it's clearly a stalemate, at some point, it'll dawn on Putin that he has to figure a way of getting out of this because nothing positive is really happening. But I think Putin is unwilling at this point to even say it's a stalemate. Frankly, it's not a stalemate. Ukraine is obviously winning at this point.
It's astonishing. It boggles my mind. And I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. And which just shows you how much I understand about the whole situation. And there are nuances to it as well that I think we can learn from. The fact that we are so engaged in this invasion of a country filled, with people that look like us. Compare it to other countries where people of color, this is happening. Is that up high in the news thing? That's another discussion entirely, though. But I think it needs to be, we need to have that in the back of our minds as well. Are we more engaged in this, because the people look like us?
No, I think that's a very good point. I think you're right. There is a lot of latent racism. By the way, speaking of which, I also think, I don't know how many people are aware of this, and apropos of racism, Senator Rand Paul, who is a racist, he said he would, if he could go back in time, he'd vote against the Civil Rights Act of the 1960s. But he
just keeps getting better and better, doesn't he, Paul?
Yeah, and he basically, he's not even consistent. His father, Ron Paul, is an arch libertarian, which I don't agree with a lot of the libertarian view, although, as you know, when it comes to freedom of expression, to get back to that, I'm in favor of no FCC. I don't like to see the government regulating communications at all. So, I have some libertarian
tendencies,
elements in what I think should be done. I do want to see government more limited in some areas. But even though I don't agree with most of the libertarian philosophy, I understand what it's saying. And I thought it was amazing that, I don't know if you saw or heard this the other day when Secretary of State Blinken was testifying before the Senate committee that Rand Paul is on. He basically was touting the Russian line. He wonders why we're involved in this.
Wow.
And so this isolationist point of view, I guess that's a traditional Republican view, and I guess that's consistent with the libertarian philosophy. But on the other hand, saying anything in support of this fascist dictator, this guy who basically poisons his political enemies, and if he doesn't do that, he throws them in jail and arrest reporters.
Yeah.
Basically, how can a libertarian say anything positive about that? How can a libertarian, in any manner, shape, or form, support an outright fascist?
Yeah.
So this war has brought to the fore all kinds of crazy
It
things.
really, and I mean, not to make, not to, not to minimize it at all. It gives you a lot to think about. Because yes, things are terrible and we need to support them, but at the same time, this is the country that they had I think it was athletes or students that were trying to get back to Africa and they couldn't get out because they gave the seats to white people, that sort of thing. So there's a lot to unpack here. As time moves on, there's a lot to unpack and understand, and it's not one of these whatabouts, that Facebook and the internet loves to posit and like, well, we need to support Ukraine, but what about this thing that happens? Like, well, we need to learn from everything and not repeat it. I think that's what's going down. So I support Ukraine, of course, and I regret that some people were treated differently because of their skin color. And I also think we need to bring into focus the plight of people who don't look like us as well. We need to focus that. I mean, that's something that's out there, but in terms of news coverage and things like that, we need to rethink that.
Listen, I agree completely with what you're saying. I winced and I thought it was really unfortunate when I heard those reports of the Ukrainians giving people a hard time if their skin color wasn't white and they wanted to leave the country. I thought that was outrageous, and that's probably the single worst thing that I've heard about the Ukrainians. So they're not perfect, they're not angels, nor are we, but we're still a lot better than these Russian monsters.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and let me also say, by the way, that I think that on that topic, maybe it was a very good thing. Not maybe, I think it definitely was a good thing for the United States to have sent over to Ukraine not only the Secretary of State Blinken, but our Secretary of Defense Austin, who obviously is a black man, and that in effect shows the Ukrainians what we are here in America. We are a country, we're a very flawed country in many ways, but we have gone much further into truly making a reality of it doesn't matter what your ethnicity is, the color of your skin doesn't matter. You can rise to the top. You can be president, as it was the case with Barack Obama. You can be Secretary of Defense, etc. So that is something that the United States can help be a leader in the world in. But I do think, though, that first and foremost is to do whatever is necessary to keep Ukraine alive and succeed.
Yes.
And then we can focus on helping them, if they want our help, to improve
to evolve, to socially evolve, and
right.
Yeah, that is definitely a goal. And I think we need to rethink, I think we need to use this as a time to just think about all these things and how the world, comes together, or in some cases comes apart. We have about 22 minutes left. I can't help, as we're discussing this, want to throw out that I was kind of thrilled that we have such an experienced statesman in the White House as Joe Biden, for all his experiences, throughout his years, rather than the alternative. Could you imagine? I look back at what happened when that infamous phone call to Zelensky happened, and so many people, so many civil servants, took the fall for that got relieved of their positions when they uncovered this thing. How do you? I mean, can you imagine what this invasion of Ukraine? I read somewhere that the invasion of Ukraine wouldn't have happened if Trump was president, because Trump would have just given them, just facilitated everything that Putin wanted from Russia. Do you have an opinion or idea about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Ukraine wouldn't be in existence right now if Trump had been reelected president. And I think the reason that Putin attacked Ukraine, I think that Putin was hoping, expecting that Trump would be reelected. Whether or not, and we've talked about this many times also, I don't think we'll ever know to what extent Russia influenced the election of 2016. They definitely did in terms of their bots and spouting misinformation that back then in that election, Twitter and Facebook and social media just allowed like an open sewer on their system. And both Twitter and Facebook and social media in general have gotten a little smarter. That's another problem, by the way, with Musk taking over Twitter. I hope he doesn't open up that sewage pipe again and just let all that spew out onto Twitter. And what I'm talking about is this disinformation, not only about COVID, but about Russia and what its intentions are. And I don't know, and we may never know. Eventually, maybe we will. Maybe some research will show us how much Russia actually did. I tend not to believe that Russia actually manipulated the votes. If there was any evidence of that, it probably would have come out, meaning, the vote counting, not the vote casting. So I'm assuming that did not happen. And at this point, at least, from my limited knowledge, I would say that the result in 2016 of a miscreant like Trump being in the White House was the result of the anachronism of the Electoral College. Hillary Clinton won the popular vote. More people in America wanted her to be president than wanted Trump to be president. But because of this idiosyncratic, archaic system, Trump managed to get a majority in the Electoral College. Maybe there were other things as well. But I think that Putin was hoping and expecting that somehow that would happen again. And I think that the moment that Putin realized that Trump was not going to be in the White House, he said to himself, okay, you know what? We're going to have to take matters into our
Yeah,
own hands
yeah,
and invade Ukraine. Because I think you're right. Had Trump been in power, I mean, look, I think that Zelensky still would have tried to put up a fight, but I think Trump wouldn't have given Zelensky one single armament if he could have prevented any of that from happening. That has prevented the U.S. from helping Ukraine. We know that Trump was on the verge of withdrawing from NATO. The lunatic Trump, he was worried about, we bear a much larger expense than the other countries did. They're rooking us.
yeah.
This is how this man with the political understanding of a toad, this is how he understands the world. And I don't mean to insult toads, but so, you know, and so I think God help Ukraine and for that matter the world had Trump still been in office. But I think the fact that Trump lost, and I think you're right
Yeah.
that Biden is president. I think that Biden, he talked to Putin a few times before the invasion, and I think Putin concluded correctly that he wasn't going to be able to somehow talk Biden into letting Russia take a big piece of Ukraine or take Ukraine over completely. Totalitarians love each other. Mussolini loved Hitler. Hitler was happy to have Mussolini as a sort of vassal totalitarian, helping Germany in World War II. Trump, because he's a totalitarian in his heart, he doesn't want democracy. He doesn't like democracy. We saw that on January 6th, 2021. He doesn't care about voting totals. He thinks he's entitled, to be present as long as he wants to. That's what totalitarians do. Trump doesn't care about the truth. He's a classic example of might makes right. That's what the Nazis said. Not truth makes right, might makes right. And Trump, therefore, loved and loves Putin. He wants to be just like Putin. He admires Putin.
Yeah.
And Putin understood that. And the world would be completely different. I think we, the world, with Trump in office, and given what Putin is now doing, we came perilously close to Europe taking a major step back to where it was in the 1930s. And only because Joe Biden was elected, Joe Biden was able to reinvigorate NATO. Biden and his advisors, I think, have done a brilliant job putting together alliances, NATO itself, strengthening NATO. Austin, Secretary of Defense Austin, had that meeting in which he had non-NATO members like Japan and Israel from all over the world meet and talk about a cohesive military strategy to support Ukraine. So I think that Biden and his staff and his cabinet members have done a brilliant job in doing that. And I think that they too, history will say, saved democracy because we're under, a dire threat now. And, we can't forget about the fact that I know that you think about this a lot. There's fascism at large here in the United States.
Yes.
Trump still got millions of votes. There are millions and millions of people here in the United States who don't care about the truth, who feel, that they've been mistreated, who are disgruntled, aggrieved for whatever reason, and the way that they express that is to support a totalitarian person like Trump.
And the wannabes that are coming up through the ranks, DeSantis and Abbott. I mean, if Trump left the planet tomorrow, there are two candidates right there who very, very much love to take up the mantle, and I believe are actively trying to get on the ballot for 2024.
Well, you're completely right, and they're worse than Trump because they're more articulate than Trump.
Yes.
Trump, for people who value freedom, Trump's clumsiness, his inability to articulate, even just like a simple sentence, that actually was a very good thing. That was like a benefit that we got. But these other people, they're much smoother than Trump. And you're completely right. I mean, that guy in Florida, he's now in a fight with Disney. And what's he so upset about? It's that Disney wants to have an environment in which gay rights are respected, and this totalitarian in Florida that aggravates him so much. He pushes through the Florida legislature this stupid, new, whatever it is, a law or a bill, I don't know, to make sure that Disney is not given special treatment. I mean,
do you think I look at that very closely? Well, not, I look at that as much as I can understand it, and I say to myself, he's literally raising the taxes of the people who live in that area of Florida. And some of the numbers I've heard thrown about is if Disney loses its position, loses its way, to maintain the area that it operates in, that homeowners in that area, their taxes will go up by $2,200 a year. That doesn't. That's not something to run for president on.
No, well, that's what but this is it's hard to understand if you value facts and truth, the appeal of these fascists. But the fact of the matter is they nonetheless get votes, even though they do things that hurt the people who are voting for them. And even though they do things that are again, just like I said about Rand Paul, saying anything positive about a fascist like Putin, totally inconsistent with libertarian philosophy. For someone like the governor of Florida, who claims he is against governmental overreach, government interference in people's lives, to go in and basically violate the Disney's company's freedom of speech. That's what it amounts to. They're entitled to say what they want to say, and they're entitled to tell their people that this is, what we want to have in our on our property, and to basically use the government to stop that. That should be something that's anathema to any conservative. But these conservatives, these Trump progeny, who basically have a lot of the same views as Trump, they are a little smoother than Trump. Uh, what they all have in common is that fascist underlying philosophy of it doesn't matter what the truth is, it doesn't matter what logic is. All that matters is power, and you wield power in a way that you do not have to be consistent with any philosophy except the worship of power, and that's how they justify what they're doing.
It is 12:52 here on WUSB Stony Brook. We're listening to my friend Paul Levinson on Lunch on Thursdays with Bill McNulty. Bill is out. There's been tragedy in Bill's family, and he will be back next week, and he will tell you all about it. I spoke at length about it at 11 o'clock. So, Bill will be here in a week. Hopefully in a week. I've been in touch with him, and so he will be back. This could go on forever, but we are going to be transitioning into hip-hop, Paul, in about 8 minutes. So we need to start wrapping it up. My friend Cut Supreme is waiting in the wings to bust a move, which would be a great palate cleanser from this entirely serious discussion about nuclear war and fascism and Mickey Mouse. It's very serious. Yeah. So we need to start wrapping it up. Paul, let's take about 2 or 3 minutes and see if we can try to give our listeners a little bit of hope here. And then I want you, of course, to put out all the places where the listeners can find you online and in the bookstores.
Well, first of all, look, as far as hope is concerned, the fact that Ukraine is doing so well, while there's life, there's hope. And I'm always an optimist. I am worried, but I'm glad to see where we are now. As far as what I'm doing, actually, there's some hope in that. I wrote an essay called Hitler, Trump, Putin. You can just search on that, quote, Hitler, comma, Trump, comma, Putin, in which I go into a lot of these analyses of those three fascists and why they have so much in common and why we have to do everything we can against them. But maybe this will be good news for some people. Maybe it'll be bad news for other people. I'm still writing science fiction.
Yes.
And I want to mention something that actually I'm going to convert into a novel. Back in January, I wrote, and it's published on a system called Vocal, a story called It's Real Life. And if that sounds at all familiar, the song that the Beatles sang in the 90s, It's Real Life, which was a song that John Lennon wrote, and Yoko gave the surviving Beatles a tape of that, and Jeff Lynne came in and they put that together. It's one of my favorite Beatles songs. The original title of that song was It's Real Life. So I wrote an alternate history story in which Pete Fornatale, and you'll recognize the name, the late, great Pete Fornatale, a disc jockey who started out on WFUV FM radio, in many ways a sister station to WUSB. Pete Fornatale went on WNEW FM for many years. Then he came back to WFUV, and tragically he died, I think, in 2012. So I wrote an alternate history story about Pete in the 1990s, and You know that it's alternate history because he's playing a song called "It's Real Life" by the Beatles in the 1990s, and all four of the Beatles are alive. And he's going, and then he takes a train downtown to Grand Central Station. But by the time he gets there, he's in another reality. And so it's one of my favorite stories that I ever wrote. It's free of charge on this site.
I've
So
read it. Yeah, it's awesome.
yeah. Oh, well, thank you. And I'm also, though, converting that into a novel. I have a series of alternate reality stories, all of which involve Fordham University. I'm sure the university is very happy that they're my alternate history stories. But
If Mike Resnick was with this, he could do an anthology called Alternate Fordhams.
yes, that's absolutely right. Well, I think I'm going to, so basically this, it's not really a novel. It is going to be a series of short stories that are all linked together because they're drawing on the same. There's something about Fordham University that enables people, when you walk through the tunnels of Fordham University or whatever, to be flipped into alternate realities with all kinds of interesting consequences. So, I mean, I'll just give you one other. There's another free story I've already written.
I'm sensing a Netflix series here.
Yeah, well, hey, I'll go for it. Hey, Netflix could use some of my stuff given the problems they have.
Levinson saves Netflix. I could see that. I could see the headline in Variety right now.
Yeah, that's alternate history, also. That's a great alternate. Anyway, I wrote. So yeah, you'll find a story called "The P&A." In this alternate history, the P&A is what we call the A and P, but everything is like sort of backwards.
Oh, different. I love it.
So I'm having a lot of fun with it.
Oh man, that sounds great. Keep us posted on that. And how do people find you online, Paul? You got this story for free online. You have this essay, that people are going to want to read after our serious discussion here. What's the URL? And also you have a podcast as well, right?
Yes, the podcast is. I'll just give you the names rather than the URLs because they're too big to say. The podcast is Light On, Light Through. That's LIGHT ON LIGHT THROUGH. That's the name of the podcast. As far as finding those stories, just search for quote, "It's Real Life," unquote, Paul Levinson. It'll bring you to the site. You can just search for quote, Hitler, Trump, Putin, unquote, Paul Levinson. It'll bring you to that site also. It's on that same site, Vocal. You'll certainly have more fun reading "It's Real Life" than Hitler, Trump, and Putin. And if you want to talk to me anytime, I'm at Paul Lev, PAULLEV, at Twitter. I'm a very friendly guy. And
Elon Musk hasn't kicked him off yet.
Not yet.
Listen, Scotty O and the Beatles show is coming up at 3. It's being partially preempted for sports, but Scotty O, if you're listening, man, you got to check out this short story by Paul Levinson, all right? Because Scotty does this Beatles show where he plays the whole 2 hours revolves around. It's a Beatles-centric thing, either Beatles covers or other things. It's great. But yeah, he needs to touch base on that. Paul, as always, an honor and a pleasure. We had a lot to talk about. We didn't finish. I need to have you back. So next time I'm doing a fill-in for Bill, let's hook up and let's do this again. All right, my man?
I want you back. Ooh, baby.
Ooh.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to anytime.
And also remember when you Google Paul Levinson, you can also pick up his album as well. So it was not coming up. What was the name of the album again, Paul? It was
the new album is Welcome Up, Songs of Space and Time.
Welcome Up.
Yeah.
The Light on Light Through podcast.
And I hope you enjoyed that interview. I will say, by the way, that if you are interested, go to the Light on Light Through webpage. That's lighttroughh.com. And search for Captain Phil, and you'll find, at least half a dozen other interviews that Captain Phil has done with me over the years. And if you're interested in hearing me talk about political issues and social issues, which I do from time to time on Light On, Light Through, but you can hear much more of that on two other podcasts. One is a podcast called Hot Media. Bob Mann, his host, has been interviewing me for years, usually about political events, about media and communications. And then the other podcast, where I just did an interview earlier this evening, is called Being Frank. That is hosted by Frank LeBuono, and here he also interviews me about, some of the same things I talked about and you heard me just talking about on this episode of Light On, Light Through. And in the show notes for this episode, you'll find links to the latest episodes in which I've been interviewed on both Hot Media and Being Frank. Also, I'll be back here soon. There are lots of new shows on television. I owe you a review of the latest episode of Star Trek Picard. I owe you a review of Slow Horses. I think it's the final episode of that little series. And I owe you a review, of The Man Who Fell to Earth, and a review of the next two episodes of Outer Range, that strange science fiction series. So I'll be back here very soon. In the meantime, stay safe, stay sound, and do what you can to help those brave people defeat the Russians who have invaded their country, Ukraine.
Athens, 2042 AD. She ripped the paper in half, then ripped the halves, then ripped what was left again into bits and pieces of history that could have been. Sierra Waters had read once that, years ago, it was thought that men made love for the thrill, while women made love for the sense of connection it gave them.
Curled Up with a Good Book says Sierra Waters is sexy as hell. You can find out more about The Plot to Save Socrates by Paul Levinson at theplot2savesocrates.com.
Paul Levinson spilled code about an ancient biotech war raging on in secret for centuries.